All right. Hi, everyone. We're back with the podcast with me, Ganesh, the head architecture at TypeDB, Joshua, the CTO of TypeDB, and James was the principal scientist at TypeDB who has been around for quite a long time, and we're still staying in touch. So here we are. We are here to talk about a few things. I think this is going to be like an ongoing thing. And today, I think the topic is the branding strategy that we had gone through for the past couple of years.
And to add to that, also what the different things meant to different people. And since we were building in the open source community, I think that had some significance outside of the company as well. We had a lot of people attached to certain names and people who didn't really get certain names, and why we changed through those things. That's kind of an interesting lesson and journey we went through on the way to where we are now.
Yeah. Which started about 7-8 years ago with us under the name Grakn, if you guys still remember those days, 2017, 2018.
Grakn 1.5 days.
Grakn 1.5 days.
1.0 must have happened at some point.
Yeah.
That's about when we joined, right?
1.3, I think.
1.3.
Yeah, so Grakn, the company was itself called Grakn Labs, and the database was called Grakn. I remember when I first joined, the tagline of the database was that Grakn was the database for AI. That was a tagline before anything else. Yeah. So
that's quite funny. We've gone full circle.
Yeah.
Everyone's gone full circle.
Yeah, the domain itself was Grakn.ai. Don't know if you guys remember that. Those were the days, and I think we had a lot of association with AI. We wanted to be associated with kind of like the entire kind of movement over there. That was when I think deep learning was just at its peak, with CNN making quite a lot of waves, and was basically adding a lot of things that we weren't able to do before. What's your take on it back then?
I want to defer that to James, who was doing all the machine learning.
Yeah,
It's true.
Well, that's it. It's because I think it makes sense then, and it makes sense now to be the AI play, because like the company started to try and do semantic search, right? We've just been talking about that internally this week, and then ended up as a database company because there wasn't a database to serve doing semantic search, right?
Yeah.
But even at that time, I came on to try and figure out the piece of how to connect machine learning,
statistical, probabilistic,
onto
uncertainty
into a database which was purely factual, and how do we start trying to rectify between the two? And that was a really interesting time, because we were trying to we did one of the early pieces of work in graph neural networks at that time, picking up on some stuff that came out of Stanford, really good research group there. And then what we had is that where they were dealing with just like property graphs, essentially, like I don't know if it was even a property graph, just nodes and edges, network X graphs, I think it was, and it was really scant data, but then we could have all the rich type information coming from TypeDB, and we could show that we could actually like predict some links and this kind of thing. Obviously that space has boomed since, but also on the branding side of that, if we're talking about getting that message out, that message went around really quickly, and we found that I think we had 14K views on one of those really early videos. It was great, on one of the machine learning ones. It was super popular, but we didn't really see many people actually boots on the ground coming and doing something with it and building something on it. Right? I mean, if they did, they didn't come back to us and say, "Oh yeah, we're doing this." We had a few, but not nearly as big as the social media reaction. Like the hype was there for it, but people actually with the know-how or whatever to get in and build something. Which
might chime with what you see these days, is everyone's doing AI, but the people building real production applications might be fewer.
Yeah. What was your take on that brand?
I think there was a lot of the discussion even internally around, and the story that we were building on of Grakn being for AI and knowledge graphs and stuff like that, and the belief that knowledge graph at the time was kind of a nascent or not very well known thing, so we had to do education around it. And I think that Grakn being the knowledge graph database, graph knowledge, Grakn, right? Producing a fun name, sort of having that kind of playful, we are this new player in the field feeling we tried to lean into that a lot. And I think internally it was fun, and externally we didn't find that people really were doing a great scope of things because knowledge graphs were a smaller field at the time. And I think I associate with the term Grakn is like we had a very strong community, a small, very active, dedicated community of users in the open source, building things as well in the knowledge graph space, people doing expert systems, people playing with the AI side. But then because it was such an early time, I guess, in knowledge graphs being popular, it was, I think, just people starting to talk about Google Knowledge Graph and stuff, but it wasn't really a widely used thing. So I think the problem and the benefit of the time was it's very distinctive. Yeah. We had some problems with people thinking Grakn or Kraken. Like, what term do you mean here? Is it?
Yeah.
But it had like a playful brand, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately that was beneficial and detrimental because we were shoehorned into just doing knowledge graphs, and the evolution of what I saw also your work being at some point was we were doing kind of this prototype researchy machine learning stuff, but lacking commercial application in some ways. We found that more traction was found in the like more billion-dollar database application space, and that kind of prompted us to try to be more general, I think. And
well, I think all of it was actually all really quite well aligned at the time.
Yes.
But not aligned to something which had like commercial potential. I think that's
at the time, at least.
Certainly at the time. Well, I mean, the term knowledge graph, like you said, I think that siloed us also into people thinking that it could only be used for actually quite a small subset of real use cases. When you just talk about what you actually use a knowledge graph for, I think you're right. Expert systems, that tended to be really small knowledge graphs, but with intricate interplay between stuff,
and
right?
the deduction and stuff.
Yeah, and then there was the wider, like, I want to model my whole business, right? Or I want to model this domain over here. But most of it tended to be people wanting to get like one model together with one batch of data and then ask some insights over that knowledge graph, and then that was it, right? And that's how everyone saw interacting with the knowledge graph, was not, I'm going to get like continued value all the time over this. And when they did want to do that, maintaining the knowledge graph became an issue for them. They're like, how am I going to do that?
And
right?
it was
needs to be
then more like
caught.
Scientists and stuff, not the engineers who we were looking after.
It was how can I take the data I've already got in another system and pour it into a knowledge graph and use it. Whereas our mantra was always just like, your knowledge graph should be your single source of truth.
So I think I'm identifying two problems here. One is that, so first of all, we're already talking about a slight transitions in our messaging from being the database for AI, which is by then quite kind of like the buzzword, right? Which means on one side, we get a lot of traction, but on the other side, we've got all kinds of people buying into distractions. And then we move to knowledge graph, which was at the time, I think it's a smaller niche, but at the same time is also still somewhat unfocused, given that it's becoming the next thing and everyone's trying to ride on it, right? And like they're adding their own twist, which means that the expectations become slightly bigger than what it should be, right? So personally, I also felt that the name Grakn, while cool, had become less specific, had become more unspecific to what we are actually doing. So I'm seeing this slight misalignment between what the people in the community are expecting us to do versus what we actually do under the hood, which I think brings me to the next point, which was when we transitioned from the name Grakn, right? We had to make that decision from having the name Grakn to having the company name being fatical with the database called TypeDB, right? I think in this period, we had to mull over it, and we decided on the name, which I think I actually quite like, particularly the database name. I think it's quite descriptive. It's quite more mature. It's positioned us in a place, at least the way we think about it. We're going to talk about whether it end up being true in practice, right? In a bit. But I think the name TypeDB is actually quite meaningful and places us in quite a kind of like a good spot, right? Being a database with the name similar to, say, MongoDB, CockroachDB, CouchDB and whatnot, right? Following the same kind of like naming convention, and also the fact that the database itself is, we would like to call it that our database is have a strong type system, and hence why, just like the language TypeScript, for instance, which has a typed JavaScript, we would like to say that our database, relative to other databases such as MongoDB or Redis, which are all key values and very free in what you can do, right? Has a strong type system, even compared to SQL, right?
Yeah, of course.
Had a lot of that. So we've changed the name to become more mature, to become more specific, right? I think the why is quite strong there, that we want to differentiate ourselves. I do like to hear what's your take on it. Do you like the name? Was there any sort of
I have quite strong feelings about this one. I didn't like the name Vatical. I never liked it.
Right.
Just never liked it.
And we'll talk about that one in a sec.
But TypeDB, I think also when that came around, I think the whole team was behind that because everyone could see that married up what the change we needed, and it was less culty and has less personality. These are the two things we lost. Well, among other things, because what we also lost was the reputation we already had as Grakn, right? That which was definitely a lot bigger than any of us understood. But it definitely reflected. It's a much wider pitch then, right? It was a much broader, and it's just saying whatever you're doing, you can have your data, you can have your database typed. Why not? And that takes you out of that silo of being a knowledge graph, and like you say, putting DB in there. We're a database. Don't think of us as a knowledge graph, as some sort of semantic layer thing that you're gonna copy your data into to get some insights and throw it away.
Use this as
this as your course, as your centralized single source of truth. Work with that, right? That's what it's embodying, and sounds profesh. It sounds like we're taking this seriously. It sounds like we've got computer science terminology in there as well. It's hitting all the nails on the head for everything else, even if you have to deal with the fact that it doesn't sound quite as glitzy or as fun as Grakn does. But I think what's interesting is, we kind of covered this before, is that we didn't quite have Grakn actually being used widely enough, and with an email in everyone's inbox that we could say, hey guys, we've rebranded this to TypeDB. We didn't have that outreach as a back and forth. We couldn't just actually let everyone know. There was no channel by which to do that. So inbound traffic.
When did we first realize that?
So, I think we only realized a bit later, to be honest, but I think there was at least a somewhat conscious effort to, I think, which in hindsight we maybe should have done differently, and is one of the lessons from the whole journey of the company. But we had a strong following as Grakn. We really believed that we didn't want to be shoehorned into just a semantic layer kind of feeling, like you said, and wanted to be a general purpose database. And then moving to having TypeDB be the product. And then immediately people didn't recognize the continuity. And that was a real problem. And I think we didn't also do some of the procedural elements very well, such as setting up all the right redirects and broadcasting multiple times and as widely as we could that we had done this rebrand. And so our really close and active, loyal users and power users and stuff obviously understood it. They were in our Discord community. They were very active. But there was a whole, I think we didn't understand, like you said, how big it was, a whole secondary layer of people who had been hearing about Grakn over the years we used to do a lot of meetups pre-COVID, through webinars, through events, through blog posts, all of these things that we had touched people, and they just lost touch, and they maybe thought Grakn's dead or it's disappeared. And transitioning to TypeDB was ultimately, I think, a multi-year cost in terms of momentum and knowledge of who we are and what we do. And in many ways, TypeDB can do almost one of the reasons we have the term TypeDB is that it's very general, and Grakn's use case of knowledge graphs is one component of what you can use TypeDB for. It's just one part, and we wanted to say, no, we can do knowledge graphs, but we can also do anything you want.
The knowledge graph people will still find you.
We want them to still find us.
Database.
Exactly. Well, we wanted them to find us, but we didn't do that effectively in the beginning. And we were trying to move away from knowledge graphs because that was Grakn brand. But really, we're obviously still good at knowledge graphs because it's the same underlying tech. So transitioning there was not smooth. We should have done it. And I think the second we should have done it smoothly. And the second problem I think we introduced is we were thinking really quite big vision thinking, and we tried to split the company name and the product name. And that's where this term vertical came from. And maybe you you remember it also like I do, but we wanted a .com and it had some meaning. And we came up with a term for the company, and then we might have multiple products, so we should establish 2 brands. And I think as a small company with a following, they're trying to carry over. Now the people that do realize it are confused. What's TypeDB versus vertical? And the number of times we got that question.
Do you think the fact that people were probably still confused about the transition from Grakn to TypeDB adds up to the fact that then it's not TypeDB but also have the name vertical that is associated with TypeDB?
I think it just added to the confusion. It just multiplied it.
If we were to start over, what do you guys think we should have done differently? Because I do like the name TypeDB.
I do like the name TypeDB.
TypeDB Labs.
If anything,
but like
I mean, where we've ended up now is we did a company rebrand rather than a product rebrand, which I think was less intense, and we basically aligned company name and product name as many companies do in the early days, especially. And now we have TypeDB, the company builds TypeDB Limited builds TypeDB, the database, and that gives just snowball effect, or at least added up effect of. What are we? What do we do? Who are we? What are we building? What's it good for? All in one identity, and I think that's been much more effective than trying to establish 2 different meanings in the world.
So going forward, we are now as a company called TypeDB with the database called TypeDB. Do you think this?
Are we going to change it again?
with the current set of names, have we simplified them enough so that hopefully going forward, the community would be able to understand?
I'd like to see your outsider perspective now that you're
I mean, I think
in the entrepreneurship land.
What we haven't even mentioned is we also had the language.
TypeQL.
We had, which used to be called Grakl. We had Grakn and Grakl, right? That I don't think almost any users got their head around the fact that Grakl was this slightly different. You've already got an alien word to use with Grakn. People got that. Using that one as well was difficult. I don't think that. So I think that was good to them. So now it's TypeQL. TypeDB, TypeQL. You have these patterns, and that works easily, and you can quite clearly see what
it's being a recognizable word
with the suffix of a couple of letters.
Gra doesn't mean much to people.
And I'm still not seeing that it's like, oh yeah, let's write that in TypeQL isn't like standard developer parlance, right? But like they'll say write it in TypeDB, but like they're not going to be so shocked by this thing. So you've only got those 2 names, and one of them it's kind of
derivative.
And people are not going to be confused if you're telling them let's write it in this language, right? I think like absolutely when in the conversations I've heard about the company, it's become much simpler to be talking about TypeDB. Like it doesn't matter. The company, the fact that it's the same, it just makes it easier. From the context, it's very clear if you're talking about the company, if you're talking about the product.
It's bringing back memories of first time we would meet people as a company and as a product called Grakn, and they'd go, what? Right? Like what? Grakn, Kraken, how do you spell that? And immediately now we just say TypeDB, and they're like, oh, okay. This is just taking away the first like if you have a learning curve, it's just the first curve is just
you wouldn't think it would need this much time and attention. As engineers, you think this is just a human thing. You just tell humans, but that's easy. I just explain this.
It's just a renaming. It's just the name.
It's even and to engineers, we're talking to technical people. And still it's just it's the same as talking to any people. You need to have that thing called clear and packaged up in a way that they get an impression. The impression is the right kind of impression. All these things.
I do think that the new name hopefully has become simple enough that we don't need to basically rethink of.
We don't have to start from explaining from zero.
I think the identity has quite settled on the fact that this is like a database product, clear from the name, and that type system has got.
It's a big part of our identity.
Exactly right. So if we are to close off the discussions today, what do you think have we learned going forward from this exercise, which was supposedly easy, but apparently there's quite some nuance to it?
I mean, from my point of view, having seen it from early days through to where we are now, and re-establishing TypeDB as a brand with momentum and identity and community and stuff like that, that was a multi-year cost in hindsight. And I think undervaluing and underplaying the impact of brand and identity, and it's just a rename, that engineering speak. And even if our business instincts should have been smarter on that, I think even the business side had an underestimate of how difficult and how impactful and how to do it properly. And there are, I'm sure, ways to do it well. But you see it in industry multiple times. Whenever someone renames AngelList or TransferWise, or they go to the new name, and you're like, it's going to be hard. And
totally.
It's like the mental associations have to be rewritten, and you can do it for new people more easily. But if you're trying to bring people along for the journey, it's hard. And I'm glad it happened in the past, and it's been years now, but I would really loathe to rename anything.
Really difficult though, because starting out and you don't know exactly what your product looks like. So then you have to stick with basically the technical debt, if you like, of the name not aligning with the product anymore. At some point you've got to make a decision to switch.
So I think now the hope is that we're banking on the fact that we've kind of like crystallized what the product should be.
And our identity around
and the identity, and then we're not going to kind of like...
I mean, all you could think if you tried to do it again is that you would try and sprint to figure out that identity of the company as fast as possible and get that battened down as fast as possible, kind of before you go out there and start spreading around the name of the brand and what have you, because otherwise you've got to do so much realignment, Because it was more like the conversations that people had.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the problem. That was actually like the word of mouth kind of stuff, and people going to events to evangelize that spread that name Grakn around, and then you can't update those people. There's no way to just tell them, it's this. No.
Renaming is just costly, I think.
I think it's way costlier than we thought. And expected. And it's been a big lesson, I think. And if anything, it's given us all a much bigger appreciation. We were early entrepreneurs and younger people back when we were doing this, and overall, I would say, give us a lot more emphasis and weight on the value and complexities of branding, marketing, sales, product, all of that, because we were so engineering focused during building the initial product.
Yeah, totally. All right. I think we've covered quite a lot here. Anything else to add?
I was just remarking on the fact that we were starting from the database for AI, and it's very funny to see how the world has come full circle. And where we started with the database for AI, and now every database is the database for AI, because that's the trend. It's like, if AI was big back then, it's 100,000 times bigger now. It's almost like I wish we had kept that phrase, because we would have been the earliest person. But this is part of the lessons of change.
No one knows that you were the first one there, except the people who were there at the time, right?
It's true.
You just need to be able to fulfill technically on the promise, and I think we're going to cover or have covered this in like other ways of like how we actually can facilitate that. And show that the idea has been there, rooted in there for about 10 years now, and that's going to come to fruition as people actually figure out how they're going to use this database with AI, right?
All right. I think we've hopefully we have somewhat made transparent
the story.
The story and the thought process behind the reason why we did the rename, and for any community members that weren't aware of the fact that we've renamed, we're still alive. Grakn is still alive, just under a different name. Yes. And with that being said, I think we're gonna call this one. Thank you so much, James, for coming to our event. Josh,
you'll be back, I'm sure.
I'll be back.
And it's nice to do this in person. In the future, we may not all be in person, so stay tuned. We'll do it with the community as well. That's the plan. All right, guys. Thank you so much for attending, and I'll see you guys next time.